The Red Sea, viewed from 30,000 feet, is a black mirror reflecting a starless sky. Below, the vast expanse of the Sudanese desert is a profound absence of light, a geographical void on the multi-function displays. Inside the cockpit of the F-15I ROM, an aircraft engineered for deep penetration and precision strikes. The pilot, known on the encrypted net only as Amir, sees the world in the stark, ethereal shades of phosphor green. His Lantern targeting pod, slave to his helmet-mounted display, paints the ground below in thermal monochrome. The convoy is precisely where the fused intelligence package projected it would be. 7 heavy-duty trucks crawling north on a packed earth track that exists on no official chart. A phantom road for a phantom cargo. The time is a 1:13 a.m. Coordinated universal time. Fuel state is critical, calculated to the minute by the flight computer. His time over target window, the non-negotiable period for engagement before his fuel state dictates an immediate return to the east, is less than 90 seconds. He must become a ghost returning to the sea. His thumb, gloved in Nomex, rests on the weapon release button on his control stick. In his ear, a single, heavily encrypted voice, transmitted via a secure satellite data link from a command post hundreds of kilometers away, speaks with clinical calm. The voice is female, analytical, belonging to the intelligence controller known as Dana. Thunder 1. Confirm target vehicle. Third element from the front. Thermal signature is consistent with the profile. We have a positive identification on the modified refrigeration unit. Repeat, positive ID. Amir's eyes flick from the head-up display to the left-hand MFD, which shows the magnified thermal image. The third truck in the line glows marginally brighter than the others. A subtle but distinct thermal bleed. A flaw in its polyurethane foam insulation, a minute detail discovered by a proprietary algorithm sifting through terabytes of archived satellite data, is now its death warrant. But something is wrong. A new variable enters the tactical equation. A new heat signature, previously masked by the terrain, emerges from a hidden wadi. It's a Toyota Hilux pickup, a technical accelerating hard to join the rear of the convoy. It was not in the intelligence brief. It represents an unknown. His rules of engagement, drilled into him until they were instinct, are absolute. No collateral damage, 0 preventable civilian casualties. Who is in that truck? Are they part of the IRGC escort, a chase vehicle with man-pads? Or are they a local family, a goat herder, caught in the wrong place at the very worst time? The voice in his ear is silent, the data link now only transmitting telemetry, waiting for his decision. The 90-second window is collapsing. 80 seconds. 79. He can release the GBU-31J dam now and guarantee a kill on the primary target. But the weapon's blast radius and fragmentation pattern create a high probability of collateral effects on the new vehicle. He can abort, and the cargo, a confirmed shipment of Iranian Fajr 5 artillery rockets and their advanced guidance components, will continue its journey to the Sinai, and from there into the smuggling tunnels of Gaza. 75 seconds. The mission, codenamed Appointment, the culmination of months of planning, a network of human assets on the ground, a secret forward operating base carved out of the desert. All of it funnels down to this single choice, made in seconds, by one man, alone in a pressurized bubble of green light and recycled air. His thumb tightens on the button. The fate of the convoy, the success of the operation, and the lives of the unknown individuals in that pickup truck are now his sole responsibility. This is the story of how that moment came to be. It is a story of a fake Red Sea diving resort, a network of spies operating under the cover of international tourism, and a secret war fought in the shadows of one of Africa's most volatile regions. This is the story of Operation Brothers. The problem began not in the desert, but in the sterile, climate-controlled environment of a cluttered forensics laboratory in Tel Aviv. The date was May 18, 2008. On a stainless steel examination table lay the twisted, scorched metal fragments of a Fajr 5 rocket that had slammed into the second floor of a shopping center in Ashkelon. 3 civilians were dead. It was the forensics team's job to give the rocket a biography, to trace its provenance from factory to impact. They used mass spectrometry to trace the chemical signature of the solid propellant, specifically the isotopic ratios of the ammonium perchlorate oxidizer, back to a specific production batch at a facility outside Parchin, Iran. They meticulously recovered a partially destroyed microcontroller from the guidance system. Cross-referencing the serial numbers on a surviving chip against a database of interdicted components, they matched it to a batch of Texas Instruments digital signal processors known to have been sold to a shell corporation and delivered to the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps' Quds force. The intelligence was irrefutable. Iran was not just funding Hamas. It was supplying them with strategic weapons, rockets with the range and payload to threaten Tel Aviv's metropolitan area. The Israeli naval blockade of Gaza was tight, a steel net in the Mediterranean. So how was this hardware getting through? The question, appended to a 40-page technical report, landed on the desk of Mir Dagan, the director of Mossad. The answer, assembled by his analysts, was a complex chain of denial, corruption, and complicity that stretched 1,000 miles south. The weapons were shipped from the port of Bandar Abbas, Iran, to Port Sudan on the Red Sea. In Sudan, a nation ruled by the indicted war criminal Omar al-Bashir, the containers were offloaded under the direct supervision of trusted local agents. Here, protected by corrupt elements within the Sudanese National Intelligence and Security Service, NISS, the rockets were loaded onto unmarked civilian trucks. They were then driven north, across the vast Nubian desert, through the lawless border region with Egypt, and handed off to Bedouin smuggling clans in the Sinai Peninsula. From there, it was a short, final journey through a sophisticated network of smuggling tunnels into the Gaza Strip. It was a ghost highway, a logistical artery pumping strategic weaponry directly into Israel's southern flank. And it had to be severed at its source. The mission was given the code name Operation Brothers, a nod to a previous Mossad operation in the same country. The objective: dismantle the Iranian smuggling route through Sudan. But you cannot fight a ghost highway with a conventional army. You cannot bomb a sovereign port without starting a war. You cannot send commandos deep into a foreign nation without risking a diplomatic catastrophe. The solution had to be surgical, deniable, and persistent. It required a new kind of operational footprint. It required a team on the ground, operating for an extended period, deep inside enemy territory. 3 individuals were chosen to form the core of this operation. The first was the man who would command the forward base, the Katsa who would build a home in the heart of the enemy's territory. His name was Yair. A veteran of Mossad's Caesarea unit, Yair was a ghost himself. In the mid-1980s, during the original Operation Brothers, which airlifted thousands of Ethiopian Jews to Israel, Yair had been one of the first agents on the ground. He had lived in Khartoum for 2 years, posing as a European agricultural consultant, building the networks, bribing the officials, and arranging the logistics that made the exodus possible. He understood Sudan. He knew the rhythm of the place, the price of a signature on a customs form, the subtle meaning of a sideways glance in a crowded souk. His defining skill, as noted in his file, was an almost preternatural ability to build trust in impossible environments. His file contained a detailed after-action report of a specific incident in 1984, when a C-130 Hercules transport plane packed with refugees had been grounded at a remote airstrip by a suspicious Sudanese army colonel. All communication was lost. Yair, armed with only a bottle of Johnny Walker Black Label whiskey and a shared, surprisingly detailed knowledge of English football, specifically the 1979 FA Cup final, spent 6 hours talking to the man. Not as a spy to a soldier, but as one man to another, complaining about wives, work, and the fortunes of Arsenal. The colonel, a man named Abdel Rahman, was a hard case, but he was also a man who felt disrespected by his superiors in Khartoum. Yair listened, he empathized, he poured another drink. He learned the names of the colonel's children. He learned of his dream to one day see Highbury Stadium. By dawn, the two men had formed a strange, ephemeral bond. Yair left the colonel with the rest of the whiskey and a promise to send him a genuine Arsenal scarf. The plane was eventually allowed to depart, its cargo of human lives secured by a conversation. Yair's new job was to build a physical base in Sudan that could see the ghost highway without being seen. The second key figure was 8,000 kilometers away, in a windowless, soundproofed room at Mossad headquarters in Glilo, north of Tel Aviv. Her name was Dana. She was a prodigy from Unit 8200, Israel's elite signal intelligence corps. Her legend was forged in the crucible of the 2006 Second Lebanon War. Flashback, sound of overlapping frantic radio chatter in Arabic and Hebrew, the hum of servers, the sharp click of keyboards. July 2006. A cramped, mobile SIGINT container on the Golan Heights, vibrating from a nearby artillery battery. The air is thick with the smell of stale coffee, sweat, and ozone. 22-year-old Corporal Dana stares at a cascading wall of encrypted data on her monitor. For 3 weeks, she and her team have been trying to crack Syria's new command and control network, a Russian-supplied system using a complex frequency hopping algorithm. It's a digital fortress. Her commander, a grizzled major, leans over her shoulder. "Anything, Dana?" The 108th Brigade is walking into a meat grinder if we don't find that Syrian tank reserve. Dana shakes her head, her eyes burning from lack of sleep. "It's perfect, sir. The entropy is perfect. There's no pattern." But she doesn't believe it. Nothing made by humans is perfect. For days, she hasn't just been looking for a pattern in the signal. She's been trying to understand the philosophy of the code. She started cross-referencing the algorithm's behavior with external events. And she found it. A tiny, almost imperceptible anomaly. When Syrian field commanders transmitted large data files, battle plans, aerial photos, the system's processing load spiked. To compensate and avoid latency, the pseudo-random number generator that controlled the frequency hops took a microscopic shortcut. It would briefly repeat a sequence of 16 characters from earlier in the transmission. It was a flicker, a digital stutter, a needle in a digital haystack. "Wait," she says, her fingers flying across the keyboard, isolating the stuttering packets. "There. It happens every time they send an attachment larger than 5 megabytes. The key generator, it echoes." The major stares, uncomprehending. What does that mean? Dana doesn't look up. It means for 1/10 of a second, the key is compromised. If I can isolate those packets, I can use them to reconstruct the session key for the entire transmission. She writes a piece of code, a surgical tool to hunt for these digital echoes. She runs it. For 10 minutes, nothing. Then, a line of decrypted text appears on her screen. It's a logistical request. Then another. Then a full operational order. "Sir," she says, her voice trembling with adrenaline. "I'm in. The 7th Syrian Armored Division. They're not in reserve. They're moving to an ambush position in Wadi Saluki, right now." The major grabs a handset, shouting coordinates. The intelligence Dana unlocked saved an Israeli armored brigade from annihilation. Now, her task was to apply that same talent for finding microscopic flaws to the vast, empty expanse of the Sudanese desert. She was the eyes in the sky, the digital brain of the operation. Her skill was not just code breaking, but pattern recognition on a massive scale. She could see the invisible threads connecting a change in a truck driver's cell phone provider in Port Sudan to the departure schedule of an Iranian cargo ship from Bandar Abbas 3 weeks earlier. The third pillar of the operation was the man who would be its fist, its final, decisive instrument. His name was Amir, the commander of the 69th Squadron, the Hammers, the only unit in the Israeli Air Force flying the F-15I ROM. Amir was a legend within the IAF. He was one of the pilots who had flown in Operation Orchard in 2007, the daring, clandestine airstrike that destroyed a secret Syrian nuclear reactor built with North Korean assistance. During his attack run on the reactor complex at Al-Kibar, his aircraft's electronic warfare suite screamed a warning. He had been acquired by a Syrian SA-17 Grizzly missile system. Standard operating procedure was to break off the attack, deploy countermeasures, and evade. Amir didn't. He executed a violent high-G barrel roll that brought his fighter jet to the very edge of its structural limits, the airframe groaning under 9 Gs of force. The maneuver, combined with a perfectly timed release of chaff and flares, successfully defeated the missile lock. He then rolled back in, reacquired the target, and delivered his payload, a 2,000-pound laser-guided bomb, directly onto the designated aim point. His defining skill was a cold, calculated aggression, a perfect fusion of pilot and machine capable of executing missions with zero margin for error. He would be responsible for the long-range strikes. His flights would take him thousands of kilometers from Israeli airspace, requiring multiple nerve-wracking mid-air refuelings in complete radio silence, flying in total electronic emission control, to deliver a single bomb onto a moving target in the dead of night. Yair would find the target. Dana would identify it. Amir would destroy it. The geopolitical chessboard was treacherous and crowded. Sudan, under Omar al-Bashir, was a pariah state, its leader indicted for genocide in Darfur by the International Criminal Court. Yet it was also a key, if duplicitous, player in the murky world of counterterrorism. Bashir's intelligence chief, the notorious Salah Ghosh, simultaneously facilitated the Iranian arms pipeline for a price, while also providing valuable intelligence on al-Qaeda operations in the region to the CIA for another price. Langley's Special Activities Division ran a string of assets out of Khartoum, hunting for the ghosts of the USS Cole bombing. This created an immediate, tangible risk. In the early planning stages, a Mossad surveillance team operating near Port Sudan had to abruptly abort their mission and go to ground for 48 hours when an American MQ-9 Reaper drone, operating out of Djibouti, unexpectedly began circling their position. They had stumbled into the kill box of a CIA operation targeting an al-Qaeda courier. The near miss sent a chill through Mossad headquarters. A blue-on-blue incident in the shadows would be catastrophic. To the north, Egypt's General Intelligence Directorate, the Mukhabarat, was running its own aggressive operations in Sudan, trying to stem the flow of weapons into the Sinai, which fueled their own insurgency. They viewed Sudan as their backyard and would react with extreme prejudice to any perceived Israeli encroachment. The Mossad team would have to be ghosts, invisible not just to their enemies, but to their wary friends as well. This instability was both a danger and an opportunity. A danger because the operational environment was utterly unpredictable. An opportunity because a government built on a foundation of corruption could be manipulated. The intelligence picture painted a stark reality. Since the Karine affair in 2002, when Israeli commandos intercepted a ship carrying 50 tons of Iranian weapons, Iran had shifted its strategy. The direct sea route was too exposed. The land bridge through Sudan was their new priority. Intercepted communications between Quds Force commanders spoke of creating a ring of fire around Israel. The Fajr 5 rockets were just the beginning. Intelligence reports, corroborated by human sources, indicated that more advanced systems were in the pipeline. C-704 anti-ship missiles that could threaten Israeli naval vessels and its newly discovered offshore gas platforms, and advanced explosive-formed penetrators, EFPs, capable of defeating the reactive armor on Merkava tanks. The Ashkelon attack was the final catalyst. Prime Minister Ehud Olmert convened a late-night meeting of his security cabinet. The recommendation from Mossad, delivered by Dagon himself, was bold. Don't just intercept the convoys in the Sinai. Don't just rely on patchy satellite intelligence. Go to the source. Establish a persistent presence inside Sudan. See the route, map the network, and dismantle it, piece by piece. The political risk was immense. If Israeli agents were caught in Sudan, it would be a regional crisis of unprecedented scale. But the risk of inaction was deemed greater. The mission was approved. The official order was signed on a Tuesday in July 2008. The objective was clear: find a way to put eyes and fists inside Sudan. The search for a suitable cover story began. It had to be plausible, sustainable, and provide a legitimate reason for a rotating cast of Westerners and large amounts of specialized equipment. Yair's planning team spent weeks analyzing possibilities. Then, a junior analyst found something perfect: a tourist resort built in the early 1970s by Italian entrepreneurs on the shores of the Red Sea. It was called the Arouse Holiday Village. It was a collection of bungalows and a main lodge, located in a pristine, isolated area. But the business had failed. The resort had been abandoned, left to the sun and the sand for over 2 decades. It was a ready-made front. It was isolated. Its location on the coast provided a potential route for seaborne infiltration. And the business of tourism was the perfect cover. Tourists need diving gear, compressors, boats, generators, and large satellite dishes, all of which could be modified or used to hide the tools of espionage. The plan was audacious. Mossad would lease the abandoned resort from the Sudanese government through a shell company registered in Zurich. They would renovate it and open it as a genuine, functioning diving resort. The staff, the diving instructors, the hotel manager, the windsurfing guide, the chef, would all be Mossad agents. Their customers would be real tourists, flown in from Europe, completely unaware that their charming vacation hosts were Israeli spies. The daily routine of running a hotel would be the camouflage for the real work happening in a secret, soundproofed, electronically shielded command room, built into what was once the resort's linen storage closet. Operation Brothers now had a home. The first phase was insertion. In late 2008, a 2-person advance team, led by Yair, arrived in Khartoum posing as representatives of Auden AG, a Swiss-Belgian tourism investment firm. They carried expensive leather briefcases filled not with business plans, but with stacks of vacuum-sealed US dollars. They began the painstaking process of navigating the labyrinthine Sudanese bureaucracy. A meeting with the Minister of Tourism required a facilitation fee of $20,000 paid to his nephew. Securing the 20-year lease for the derelict property cost another $300,000, paid directly into a government-controlled bank account in Dubai. Yair, using the skills he had honed decades earlier, played the part of the slightly naive but enthusiastic European investor perfectly. The Sudanese officials, blinded by the prospect of foreign currency, signed every document put in front of them. The Arouse holiday village was officially reborn. The next step was logistics. Shipping containers began to arrive at Port Sudan. From the outside, their manifests listed furniture, kitchen equipment, and construction materials. But hidden inside meticulously constructed false compartments were the real tools. A state-of-the-art encrypted satellite communication system, the Kestrel 7, was broken down and hidden inside the casings of 3 large diesel generators. High-frequency burst radio sets were concealed within the hollow steel frames of bed bases. Advanced thermal surveillance cameras were packed in crates labeled Professional Underwater Diving Equipment. The initial team on the ground consisted of 12 agents. The resort manager, Aaron, was a former hotelier from Eilat. The head diving instructor, Gal, was a woman with legitimate pay-dye dive master certification. They became the people they were pretending to be. While the resort was being physically rebuilt, the intelligence-gathering operation began. An agent posing as a maritime logistics consultant set up a small office in Port Sudan. His job was to build a network of informants among the dock workers and customs officials. One of these sources was a mid-level customs clerk with access to inbound shipping manifests. He was given the code name Neptune. For $500 a week, Neptune would leave a copy of the manifests for all incoming Iranian ships at a pre-arranged dead drop. This was the first critical link. Dinah, back in Tel Aviv, could now cross-reference these manifests with satellite imagery and signal intercepts. She began to see a pattern. Certain containers, listed as carrying machine parts, were always offloaded at night and moved to a specific, secure area of the port, controlled by the NISS. They never went through standard customs. This was the entry point of the Ghost Highway. The technology deployed from Arouse was sophisticated. The primary challenge was communication. The Kestrel 7 satellite uplink was the answer. It wasn't a real-time system. Twice a day, at predetermined pseudo-random times, the system would compress up to 24 hours of data into a single, heavily encrypted package and transmit it in a 1.2-second burst at an OFEC communication satellite. The burst was so short and used such a narrow beam that it was functionally invisible. Its main limitation was its power consumption. The burst required a massive spike in electricity. To counter this, the team installed their own independent power system. A series of silenced diesel generators and a large bank of deep-cycle batteries, explained away as necessary for running the resort's power-hungry air conditioning and water desalinators. The second challenge was tracking the convoys. Yair's network in Port Sudan would attempt to place a magnetic GPS tracker on a truck. But the smugglers grew paranoid and began sweeping their vehicles. The team adapted. The next generation of trackers were disguised as standard oil filters, installed by a mechanic on the Mossad payroll. Another solution was the rock tracker, a device that looked and felt exactly like a piece of desert granite, but contained a passive seismic sensor, a GPS unit, and a tiny satellite transmitter. These were placed by agents posing as geologists along suspected smuggling routes. They lay dormant until their seismic sensor detected the unique, low-frequency vibration of heavy trucks, at which point they would wake up and transmit the convoy's location. For tactical aerial surveillance, the team used small, hand-launched IAI Skylark drones. With a near-silent electric motor and a wingspan of less than 3 meters, they could be launched by a 2-man team from the back of a civilian land cruiser. Their limitation was a 90-minute battery life. They were hunter-killers, used only for the final identification once a convoy was located. This combination of human, unattended ground sensors and tactical drones created a detailed, multi-layered picture of the ghost highway. Then came the first major operational setback. In early 2009, Neptune, the customs clerk, vanished. He missed 2 dead drops. His burner phone was disconnected. A field agent sent to surveil his apartment reported it was empty, wiped clean. Yair convened an emergency meeting in the hidden command room. The air, normally cool, felt suffocating. "He's gone," Yair stated flatly. "Either NISS rolled him up, or the IRGC got to him. Either way, our window into the port is closed. The network he was part of is compromised." The team was blind. Yair activated a high-risk contingency plan codenamed Kingfisher. It involved recruiting a new asset, not a low-level clerk, but someone inside the corrupt hierarchy of the Port Authority itself. The target was a man named Tariq, a deputy director known for his greed and his connections to the NS. Recruiting him was dangerous. A misstep would expose the entire operation. Yair handled the recruitment himself, using a cutout and a classic honey trap, leveraging Tariq's weakness for women and money. It took 2 months and $250,000 deposited in a Cypriot bank. But Tariq was on the payroll. The intelligence flow resumed, more detailed and reliable than before. But the incident served as a stark reminder of their fragility. With the port picture re-established, the next step was to map the smugglers' transshipment points in the desert. Satellite imagery showed a cluster of buildings 200 kilometers north of Port Sudan, a place called Wadi Mubarak. Convoys would often stop there for 24 hours. Dana's analysis suggested it was a handover point, where IRGC handlers transferred the cargo to local Sudanese smuggling gangs. They needed eyes on the ground. A 2-person field team was sent. Ronan, a seasoned Caesarea Katsa with a background in Shayatet 13 Naval Commandos, and Shira, a young tech wizard from Unit 8200, the one who designed the rock trackers. Their mission: infiltrate Wadi Mubarak and place a solar-powered, motion-activated camera with a satellite uplink overlooking the main compound. They drove for 2 days in a battered Toyota Land Cruiser, posing as French archaeologists surveying pre-Islamic ruins. On the 3rd night, under a sliver of moon, they began their approach on foot, a 3-kilometer hike over rocky terrain. They were 500 meters from the compound when Ronan froze, holding up a fist. He pointed his thermal monocular towards a ridge overlooking their position. "Company?" he whispered. Shira looked through her own imager. 2 figures, armed with AK-47s, silhouetted against the slightly cooler night sky. Not Ines. Their posture, their equipment, it was professional. IRGC, they weren't supposed to be there. The intelligence brief said the IRGC stayed within the compound. The patrol was new. The mission was compromised. They were caught in the open. Retreating across the open ground was suicide. The patrol would spot them instantly. "Plan B." Ronan breathed into his radio, his voice calm. "We go to ground." They crawled into a shallow crevice, pulling a thermal blanket over themselves. The blanket, designed to reflect their body heat back at them, would make them nearly invisible to thermal imagers. But it was like being cooked alive. For 2 hours, They lay motionless as the temperature under the blanket climbed past 60 degrees Celsius. The IRGC patrols swept the ridge twice with their own thermals. Shira could hear their boots crunching on the gravel just meters away. Finally, the patrol moved on. Soaked in sweat and on the verge of heat stroke, they waited another hour before moving. The primary observation point was compromised. Shira pointed to a lower, less ideal cliff face, closer to the compound, but with a steeper, more dangerous climb. "There," she whispered. "The angle is worse, but it's our only shot." They spent the next hour scaling the rock face in the dark. Shira installed the camera, disguised as a rock, while Ronan provided overwatch. As she was running the final diagnostic, her tablet pinged. A new variable. A convoy was arriving early. Headlights were visible on the horizon. They had minutes to get out. They rappelled down the cliff face and ran. A frantic, lung-searing sprint back to their vehicle, reaching it just as the first trucks rolled into the compound. They had succeeded, but by the thinnest of margins. The near disaster at Wadi Mubarak forced a tactical reassessment. The Iranians were more professional, more paranoid than anticipated. The next crisis was technological. A high-priority convoy, identified by Tariq as carrying advanced guidance systems, was on the move. A field team was dispatched to launch a Skylark drone for final positive ID before Amir's F-15s could be launched. The team, led by Shira, reached the launch point just as a Haboob, a massive desert dust storm, was building on the horizon. "Control, this is Field Team 2. Shira reported over her encrypted radio. "We have a visual on the weather front. It's